Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. And as usual, I have more stories than there is time. Time for terrorists to retire permanently. Israel strikes in Doha to take out the Hamas so-called leaders. Of course, anyone representing Hamas is a terrorist. This is fascinating as the government of Qatar allows the top brass of this terrorist enterprise to hang out in luxury in their country. The official report from Israel is that 5 Hamas terrorists were taken out. Israel has also indicated that the USA was not involved in any way, but was probably advised that it was going to happen. Israel indicated the reason for the Doha bombing was that 6 Israelis were killed by Palestinian gunmen near Jerusalem the day before, simply waiting for a bus. Hamas's Al-Qassam brigade claimed responsibility for that attack. Yes, the terrorists are proud of killing innocent civilians. I underscore that Israel did the right thing here. The only thing terrorists understand is death. I note that Doha bombing was widely covered by the slopstream media, but they did not cover the death of the 6 Israelis the day before. Drug dealers' fast boat blown up. Speaking of pathetic coverage by the slopstream media, they made it sound like they were sympathetic to the crew on the boat that was blown up. The boat reportedly, according to the federal government, was carrying 11 members of the TDA terrorist group trying to smuggle illegal drugs into the USA. A recent guest on this show was Stephen Bynum, a military expert who commented that the normal crew for a small boat like this is 3 or 4. He suggested that such a large crew may have indicated that this group of terrorists had more in mind than just dealing death to Americans through these murderous illegal drugs. Keep in mind that reports are that about 100,000 Americans died each year during the Biden-Harris administration due to illegal drugs like the ones on this boat. I totally support this effort. Despite the fact that the boat was in international waters, Maduro, the brutal commie dictator of Venezuela, raised a big fuss. Instead of thanking President Trump and America for disposing of this vermin, he was complaining. A couple of Venezuelan jets buzzed the U.S. ship sitting offshore to support the interdiction effort. I recommend that if he sends them again, that these planes be shot down, as this is an act of war. Time to make sure the entire world knows that America is not the patsy that the Biden-Harris administration presented to the world. A footnote to this is that Maduro subsequently claimed that his country would initiate an effort to shut down this drug dealing. I doubt this is for real, but we'll have to see. Big-time DEA bust of Sinaloa Cartel members. Speaking of illegal drugs and terrorists, the DEA announced a 23-state enforcement effort to crack down on this terrorist gang distributing death throughout America. According to Fox News, there were millions of dollars worth of fentanyl, other drugs, weapons, and cash seized. In New England, 171 cartel members were arrested. I believe there was a congressional proposal to make dealing these deadly drugs in such quantities as eligible for the death penalty. Time to start invoking the death penalty for those who commit mass crimes like this. Domestic terrorism incident hidden by the slopstream media. While it made all the headlines eventually, it was hidden for about 2 weeks by the slopstream media. On August 22nd, that's right, weeks ago, the beautiful Irina Zarastuska, age only 23, was stabbed to death on a Charlotte, North Carolina commuter train. Her family came here to flee the Russian invasion in her home country, Ukraine. So fleeing to safety, she is brutally and senselessly murdered. Given the video of this horrible act of terrorism, is unlike the Carlos Brown Jr. will get off. However, we have to call him the accused killer for legal reasons. Reports are that he was arrested 14 times and had been sentenced at one point to a 5-year prison stint, but served less than that. Like many criminals who have received insufficient punishment for prior acts, his crimes appear to have spiraled into more violence. The accused shooter, who is black, stabbed to death an innocent white woman who was quietly sitting in the rail car seat in front of him. Many of us conservatives feel that the slopstream media tried to hide this due to the color issue. Had the colors been reversed, it is highly likely it would have been the headline for newscasts across the country on August 22nd. The Trump Justice Department is on track, and the accused reportedly said, "I got that white girl," will be charged with a hate crime under federal law. That could lead to the death penalty. As a longtime proponent of the death penalty, I support it in this case for sure. He was on the street since he was most recently released on his own recognizance by Magistrate Judge Teresa Stokes. At least one article claimed that Stokes is also Director of Operations at Second Chance Services, a mental health and addiction clinic in Charlotte, North Carolina. The suggestion being that she had hoped to make the accused a customer of the clinic. I don't know how that all fits together. Hard to tell from the limited information available. Liberal judges and prosecutors have unquestionably been soft on crime, contributing to the current crime wave across the country. Highly visible young conservative leader gunned down. Continuing my coverage of terrorism in America, on September 10th, the eve of the 24th anniversary of the horrific terrorist attack on America on September 11th, 2001, conservative activist Charlie Kirk was gunned down while speaking at Utah Valley University. The founder of Turning Point was only 31 years old with a beautiful young family. He was described as a strong Christian and a true family man. His wife and children will suffer for the rest of their lives due to this unthinkable tragedy. This is, in my opinion, yet another terrorist attack in America. I did not know him personally, but at many times I saw him on TV. I agreed with his statements and positions most of the time. This has been described as a political killing, and everything that's come out since then certainly indicates that. I recently called for a toning down of the extreme hate talk, especially by the left. Left-wing comedians have joked about killing candidate and now President Trump. This cannot be tolerated even under our liberal freedom of speech laws. I repeat my demand that we start taking more action against lefties who call for the death of President Trump and other conservatives. I was in Washington, D.C. on 9/11. I was in my car in an incredible traffic jam for 4 hours on the Washington Beltway. To my left, the 5-mile-high black cloud of smoke rose from the plane that was deliberately crashed into the Pentagon. I will never forget that day. I still feel angry at those who orchestrated it and those who committed the hijacking. Even 24 years later, a lawsuit has just been allowed to proceed against the country of Saudi Arabia for its part in this massive terrorist attack on U.S. soil. Regarding the killer of Charlie Kirk, we only have preliminary information, but it does appear that, as earlier reported, that this was a politically motivated killing, which again, in my opinion, makes it a terrorist act. And I certainly call for the death penalty. Follow the money is a very appropriate phrase. The phrase got a good workout when the Senate recently called RFK Jr. to testify about what was happening with HHS, Health and Human Services. Specifically, a head of the agency, CDC, was only on board for a month when she was fired. The controversy involved whether she was doing the right thing and got fired, meaning it was political, or she was failing the American people. The hearing itself was a 3-hour shouting match and there was no resolution. The most humorous part was when the failed senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren, went after him on COVID vaccines. But she has received almost $1 million from the pharmaceutical industry. Kennedy shoved that down her throat in a highly appropriate moment. This triggered observers to recall the famed "follow the money." I do want to note that I have mixed emotions about RFK Jr. First, he is not a health professional, and he is for certain a far left liberal in his politics. On the other hand, you often need to break some eggs to make an omelet. Banning petroleum-based colors in kids' candy makes a lot of sense. Reviewing all the vaccines being given to kids makes sense. Understanding why America did what it did during COVID and still lost over 1 million lives, and that should be understood so we never repeat it. I found this an amazing statistic. In 2021, the United States spent $4 trillion and the rest of the world just $5.8 trillion per the World Economic Forum for healthcare. Just for Medicare, Medicaid, and other federal health benefits, we spend $2 trillion a year, and yet we are not a healthy country in terms of diseases and medical care consumption or a population. Officials need to start answering for that, and now, not later.
All rise.
We have our special guest, Professor Daryl Hunter Montgomery, for this special edition. Our series Interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I am sure that you will agree that he deserves the moniker of interesting person. Professor Montgomery has written 6 books, over 800 articles, and given more than 100 public talks, including keynote addresses throughout the United States. In addition to having taught at Stony Brook and Cooper Union, he's been an independent financial journalist, political consultant, pollster, organizer of the largest investing meetup in the world, and as an expert witness in a Supreme Court reviewed landmark voting rights case. In 2015, he wrote Presidential in Politics, Donald Trump in the 2016 election. In addition to his book on U.S. politics, Professor Montgomery is the author of seminal 3-volume work, Inflation Investing, a Guide to the 2010s, as well as Inflation Smart, Profitable Investing When Money Devalues. We had to shorten his bio so we would have time for the interview itself. We welcome Professor Daryl Hunter Montgomery for his first appearance on Saving America.
It's a pleasure to be here, David.
And it's a pleasure to meet you and get a chance to talk with you for our audience. So please tell our audience about your book, Presidential in Politics, Donald Trump in the 2016 election, and how do you see that tying to the immediate election?
Well, it does actually quite well. I wrote this book in 2015, and people have to go back to that time period. People did not think Trump was a serious candidate at all. It was believed it was a publicity stunt. He really wasn't going to run. He would never make it to the primaries even, let alone get the nomination, let alone run for president, let alone become president. Now, I was looking at the trends in American politics, and I said, no, he's likely to win. And I was very much a lone voice in that space. And this is time, if you said that, you would be laughed off the stage. In fact, that really actually did, not to me, but when I actually tried to get people to publish the book, they did laugh at it and said it's ridiculous. Trump is never going to be president. It was just too absurd an idea. Now, it was an over 200-page study, actually, an analysis of the American electorate, why that leads to Trump winning. And I saw at that time that this was a realignment election. And these happen once every, several decades in American politics, sometimes many decades. And Ronald Reagan was sort of one of those elections in 1980, 84. And there's usually 2 elections in a row, not just one. And so 2016 would be the first one. And ordinarily, it would be 2020 would have been the second, but COVID completely interrupted the trend. So this is now the second in 2024. And in that election, you see the real trends, the trends manifest themselves even more. And we are seeing that right now in that the 3 pillars of the Democratic Party, in the realignment election, who supports each party switches and changes and evolves significantly. So the Democrats have three problems right now. A black vote is declining. Usually it's quite solid. They can rely on 90% of it. Polls indicate maybe around 75. The Hispanic vote, which is usually 2-1 Democrat, is now in some polls even 50-50 for Trump. So this is a massive shift. And under 30s is usually 2-1 for the Democrats. And that has shifted significantly for Trump also. So this is really big news. And in 2016, you saw the labor vote or working class vote move toward Trump. And this should have been, for decades and decades, was the Democratic vote. Solid Democrat after FDR, which was another realignment election in 28-32 with Al Smith first. So that switch, we already saw that in 2016, and that's how Trump got elected. And now we're seeing the second phase. So this makes complete sense. And people have missed it because COVID has completely interrupted the trend. And so, you know, people have to see things 1, 2, 3. If there's something in the middle, they sort of can't figure it out. And nobody believed me in 2015 and 16 at all. And people laughed and said, "Yeah, this man is crazy. He doesn't know what he's doing." But, you know, I have it in print, and I had to publish it myself on Kindle on Amazon. And after 2016, after Trump Russia came along, it actually disappeared on Amazon for several months with no explanation. So, but then it's reappeared and it's still there. Now it's a historical reference that here's how you analyze things and you know, how this should be done and it's not done, because if everyone else was doing it, they would have got the same conclusion. So this is how it relates today, where is that this is the second part of this realignment, and there should be 2 elections, usually in a row, but you know, we have one in the middle this time.
Absolutely fantastic. You know, while some politicians think only rich people invest, but you and I know that millions of average Americans have money in the market, either directly or through 401k accounts. What should our audience know about something called inflation investing? And does it still apply right now with 2.4% inflation?
Well, absolutely. This is like, we are entering an inflation era. And it's probably inflation decades, at least one decade, if not several. And we're in a, not to be too dramatic, but an inflation doom loop where inflation feeds on itself. And this has happened because the national debt is so high in the United States, and not just the United States, this is throughout the Western world. And, you know, it's almost 36 trillion now. And it's grown almost $1 trillion in the last 3 months. You know, it's skyrocketing. And years ago, in 2009, I spoke about this. 15 years ago, I said, this is going to happen. I didn't say it's going to happen exactly in 2024, but I said, this is a distant future event. And we've arrived at it today. And at that point, the debt service, amount of interest you have to pay, because when the debt becomes so high, it starts to absorb a huge part of tax receipts till eventually it absorbs all of them. We're not there yet. That's several more years down the road. And then, you know, inflation just feeds on itself and grows like a bacteria, duplicating and spreading. And I've studied in my inflation books, and I've written 4 of them. There is a history of inflation that goes back to the Roman Empire. Yes. So there's 2,000 years of inflation. And I'm planning on spinning off one of the original books into a smaller, you know, history of inflation book. So, you know, it's happened over and over and over and over again. This is not new. So, and what the average person can always do something. And I have 2 colorful stories. And one is from the German hyperinflation in the early 20s. And there was a man who bought pianos. And, you know, you need to buy hard assets. And at least he understood, buy something physical that you can own. And that's the key to inflation investing, even if you're not technically investing. And those pianos maintained their value, and they saved his fortune. So it's rather odd. I'm not recommending anyone do this, but it's a rather odd thought. And people will come up with sort of creative, interesting solutions. And I have a more interesting story from the earlier 2000s when Bush gave money. There was some federal distribution to people, and poor people got more money. And I knew these people who ran a tax service in a sort of ghettoized area. And there was a colorful character that hung around, very uneducated. And he took the money and he bought a gold tooth that he could put in and out of his mouth. And it actually was gold. So this man did inflation investing, even though he probably didn't even have an 8th grade education and seemed to be a little crazy. But that gold tooth would be very valuable one day. And I don't know if he's still alive. I don't know this man. But that was inflation investing. So even poor people or even people with very little money can do some very odd things. Now, anyone can buy silver coins. They're around $35 right now. You can get solid silver. And you can get them from the Canadian Mint and a number of mints. And there's a number of services that sell them. And usually you have to buy like 10 or 25 a stack. So that's not too much. And anyone could get a brokerage account. You don't need too much money. And you can buy things called ETFs, which are exchange traded funds. And that's equivalent to, say, a gold. GLD would be a symbol for one. And that holds physical gold. You don't have to buy the gold. You can buy and sell these things like stock all day long. So, that's very simple. And you don't need millions of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe, thousand.
Let me just interrupt you just slightly there. Gold is over $2,700 an ounce right now. I, in my lifetime, have never seen gold at such a unbelievable level, and I've heard silver is surging also. How do you feel about gold right now? Is gold becoming so uneconomic that you should be looking at silver and perhaps pianos versus gold?
No, pianos are very expensive. Silver, you make much more money on silver. It's very inexpensive. Now it's very inexpensive. Sorry, I have to go. And anyone can afford $35. I mean, yes. And usually you have to buy a group. Now Costco actually sells gold, right?
Yes, they do.
And my assumption is they were going to start to sell, and they're making a lot of profit off it. It's a booming business for them. That they will start to sell silver also. So you don't have to pay $2,700, you can pay $35. Or come in like 10-ounce bars or something. So you'll have to pay. So people can do this and make great birthday and Christmas presents, by the way.
Now let me
I encourage silver. It's a much better deal in the long run.
And let me ask you another follow-up question on that. How about just the regular stock market? Many people in America I know, for instance, as a professor, I'm in a nonprofit college, so I'm at a 403B. I have very limited choices, but won't the stocks themselves go up with inflation in some cases, unless it's a business that's being badly damaged by inflation?
Well, the answer is yes and no. If you look back in the 1970s, the stock market was in very bad shape, except commodities were in very, very good shape. And you can, if you want to buy stocks, buy gold and silver miners. Mm-hmm. And the essence of inflation investment is precious metals, and that's gold, silver, platinum, palladium, or and in some instances, if the economy is good in the periods, base metals, industrial metals, that's like copper, tin, zinc, aluminum, and then energy, that's oil, natural gas, agriculture, which, not just the food, but fertilizer products for agriculture, like fertilizer stocks, land. The best real estate investment during high inflation times is rural land, not houses, not apartment buildings, not commercial buildings, pure land. And the reason for that is usually it's cheaper and very low taxes. Governments will be desperate for money, and they will raise your real estate taxes, especially on your house and your commercial buildings, to sometimes astronomical levels. And I live in the Northeast. I'm not sure where you live, but if you go to places like Long Island or New Jersey, Westchester, places, the real estate taxes can be unbelievable.
Yes, they are here in Texas. Part of the reason I'm right in near town, Houston, Texas. Part of the reason that our real estate taxes are so high, and we also have a very high sales tax, is because we do not have a state income tax in the state of Texas. So we're all being taxed. And of course, real estate taxes tend to be something that's called regressive because, you got mom and pop. So they do have something called a homestead exemption, but the real estate values of close-in real estate are going up so fast that they're far exceeding the value of the homestead exemption, which is only $25,000 or $50,000 exemption, which means if grandma's house, which she paid $38,000 for, 30 years ago, is now valued at $250,000, she's paying tax on $200,000 because she's got the $50,000 over 65 homestead exemption. That can be a pretty good bite. And so that supports what you're saying, I think.
It's worse in other places. Where I used to live on Long Island, the taxes could be 10% of the value of the annual taxes, could be 10% of the value of the house. And it just worked out. It happened to work out like that. So imagine that if in 10 years you paid the whole value of your house in Texas.
Right. It's some pretty amazing things. Our third question is briefly explain to our audience your theory on the next stage of globalism, global bifurcation. Do you have the title for your book that you are writing on for this hot topic? And tell us a little bit about it.
Okay. The title will probably be Global Bifurcation, the Next Stage of Globalism. And the way this book evolved is about geopolitics, is I was trying to update my inflation work in my books, because I have 4 books and many articles. And all roads led to globalization. Aspects of globalization had tied in with inflation. So I wound up writing a very detailed study on global. I came up with this new theory, global bifurcation is a new theory. So what it means is the world is splitting into 2 semi-autonomous blocks. And I traced the entire 4,500-year history of globalization. People think it was the last 30 years. It goes back to ancient times. So, and it's a series. It's just like the economy, a series of expansions, declines, expansions, declines, expansions, declines. And over the long term, the world has become more and more and more globalized. So the expansions have gotten bigger and bigger, and the declines are, not as bad as they were previously. So we're entering a 30, 40-year decline period. And in those decline periods, you have a shift in power. Whatever was the dominant power in the globalized world previously loses its power and a new power rises. So in this case, it's like power, the economy is moving from the west to the east. And, then there's a whole number of sub-factors attached to I call these 2 areas the collective west and the collective east, and neither is completely west or completely east. These are arbitrary names, and a lot of people would call the collective east the globalized south plus Russia and China. It's easy to call it the collective east. So the collective west is the United States, Canada, the EU, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea. So and the East is everything else. So it's most of Latin America, Africa, and most of Asia. Asia minus Japan, South Korea, and Israel. So, and if you divide these, 84% of the world lives in the collective East.
Yes.
And a disproportionate number of young people live in the collective East. The West is old and aging. And the oldest country on earth is Japan, and the average age is close to 50. Now, I'm over 50, and we say, oh, that's not so old. But for every 100-year-old, every baby there has to be a 100-year-old to balance out. The average age is 50. So there's lots of old people in Japan, and very few people that have children. So those type of societies don't have big economic growth in the future because they don't have any people growth. And Japan is supposed to shrink by 2100 to like less than half its current population. And Europe, almost all of Europe is in the same detail. The second and third oldest countries on earth are Germany and Italy. So Western Europe is very, very old also. So this is not, demography is destiny. Well, the destiny is in the East with the young people and leaving the West. So, and there's a number of other factors. There was just a BRICS meeting. This is one of the organizing
Yes.
entities for the collective East. I've been speaking about this for a couple of years now, and it's going to absorb more and more of these countries, and basically, just like the EU did in Europe, what NATO does for defense in the West. So, so those equivalent organizations are appearing in the East and rising in power. So, and this is, say, will last till 2050 or thereabouts, from about 2020 to 2050. So we're in the early stages of this. So you better read the book.
Sounds like something we all need to pay attention to. So, Professor Daryl Hunter Montgomery, how can our audience get more information about you and your books?
Well, they can go on Amazon and put on any of the titles. I write under slightly different names because I write different types of books, and the financial books are under Daryl Montgomery, and the Trump book is under D. Hunter Montgomery, and then I also write detective novels, and that's under another Montgomery name. And then it'll be Daryl Hunter Montgomery for the globalization book.
Fascinating stories.
Please proceed.
On top of other bad news, new education stats have been announced that document something many of us know. K through 12 education is failing America. They tested high school seniors. They had the worst scores in reading since it was tracked starting all the way back in 1992. The math scores were the worst since 2005. Our public education is an international disgrace. This is despite the fact that we spend far more per student than any other country. The Pew Research Center provides the following sober data. The USA students are 38th out of 71 countries in math and 24th in science. When compared with our partners in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the U.S. ranks 30th in math and 19th in science. I assure you that it will not be due to lack of native smarts. We are wasting the most valuable resource we have. I will be blunt. There are multiple parties responsible. First, I fault the teachers' unions. If it was in my power, I would ban K through 12 teachers' unions. In Texas, we have a bit of a break since they cannot strike here in Texas. It is still a problem. I encourage parents with struggling students to sue the local teachers' unions for keeping their kids out of the classrooms during COVID and their woke policies. Second, parents must emphasize real education above all else. Take away the phones and iPads. Focus on reading and math. Third, multiple tracks, no matter what happens. With AI, humans must know enough to be the supervisors of the AI systems, not the flunkies repairing them. Not every child needs to go to college. However, our education system should be providing access to multiple tracks for vocational as well as college. That would make a lot of sense. Fourth, this may be unpopular in some circles, especially here in Texas, de-emphasize athletics. The pay and benefits for coaches and the loss of classroom time while students are participating in sports is out of control. While a bit out of date, the NCAA provided some examples. 1 in 168 high school baseball players will get drafted by a Major League Baseball team, and just 1 in 2,451 men's high school basketball players will get drafted by the National Basketball Association team. From communityliteracy.com, while about 1.5% of all high school players will make it into the NCAA college play, less than 0.2% will be drafted into the pros. In total, this reflects roughly only 1 in every 520 high school players will make it to the pros. At the same time, we're facing a type 2 diabetes problem in this country. So let's return to physical education in our schools. Let's encourage intramural sports and getting our kids moving. I am confident that America can fix this problem, just as I am confident that we can fix the national debt, the threat to civilization by the axis of evil, and cure cancer. For Americans, we just need to pull in the same direction. We have proved that in the past 250 years. Cool story about Idaho's last video store. The story was picked up by a variety of sources and it struck a positive chord with me as we wrap up a tough news week. The store is frequented for 15 years by a nonverbal woman with Down syndrome and her mother. She is now 35. Given the fact that it was the last video store in the whole state, pretty much tells you why it is shutting down. I fondly remember as a single parent taking my sons to the local video store here in Houston in the 1990s to pick up videos for the weekend. In this case, the store was located in Pocatello, Idaho, and I visited that town over 40 years ago. It's a beautiful and friendly place. Special effort was made by the owner, David Craning, to take care of this one daily customer of the video store. It turns out that he owned the K&B Quick Stop location next door to the video store that he is closing. So he set up a special corner of the convenience store with a collection of videos on a few shelves so this special customer could continue to follow her schedule. A Saving America shout out to him.
Sustained.
As we grow up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we are in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities, and the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. The badge of dishonor today belongs to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, for letting the dangerous Trendiagua gang members into the country, including a free plane ride across the country, and to Special Prosecutor Sheila Ross, the Georgia prosecutor, asked for life in prison rather than the death penalty. So the scourge of the earth is allowed into this country and given something called parole by ICE. That included a work permit. At taxpayer expense, they fly him to New York City. His fingerprints are checked and he is confirmed as a criminal, but they still allow him to stay in the United States. He reportedly committed a separate criminal act, but again, is not prosecuted or tossed out of the country. He gets a free plane ride at his request for a humanitarian flight to Georgia. The trial evidence against him was overwhelming. This was a clear-cut case for the death penalty. He has just been convicted on all counts of murdering the 22-year-old nursing student, Laken Riley, in Athens, Georgia, in February of this year. Why? Why was this not an express ticket to death row? There is no point to taxpayers feeding and housing this excuse for a human for another 50 to 60 years. So Saving America awards today's F grade to the ICE, and especially for the Soros-backed prosecutor, Sheila Ross, who did not ask for the death penalty for the gang member and cold-blooded murderer of Laken Riley.
Motion denied.
Maine governor clueless on what America wants. Of course, Maine Governor Janet Mills has openly defied the Trump administration executive order enforcing Title IX to prohibit biological males from women's sports and locker rooms. This means she is also defying her own voters who strongly favor protecting women in sports. The latest is the best U.S. Attorney General in the years, Pam Bondi, has filed suit in federal court to protect the rights of women and girls in Maine. I note that the left-leaning USA Today called supporters of the lawsuit anti-trans activists. Sorry, you jerks. Advocating for the rights of women is not being anti-trans, it is being rational. Despite the small number of biological males playing in high school and collegiate sports, the number of injuries is disconcerting. This is about safety, and that is why it is so popular with the American public.
Please raise your right hand.
The Newsom Medicaid scam. I'm already on record as asking the Trump administration to deny any federal fire assistance due to the LA fires, since we should not help out such a failed administration. Why should the rest of us overtax folks bail out such waste? Now the fool California Governor Newsom is asking the feds to bail out Medicaid there after he threw nearly $10 billion in aid to illegals in the state. In what universe is this a rational thing for California to request of the rest of us? While we're at it, time to end the billions of dollars that loser, the famed California bullet train to nowhere. If it is such a good idea, Californians should pay for it themselves.
Objection, Your Honor.
Texas Governor Abbott responds to lawmakers' hateful remarks. The latest scumball Dem to gain publicity for stupidity is Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett. She doubled down on stupid by referring to Texas Governor Abbott, who has been in a wheelchair for about 40 years, as Governor Hot Wheels. She said this at a recent Human Rights Campaign dinner. Abbott said that he found the remark disrespectful. As a typical out-of-touch Dem, she claimed it was because he wants to block illegals from entering the U.S., not his disability. Then when Abbott's supporters called her out, she attacked them, not apologizing for her own insensitivity about human rights.
May I remind you, you're still under oath.
An interesting article from the Heritage Society's The Charge newsletter contains some stunning statistics on how dependent the U.S. is on critical minerals from other countries. It indicates America is entirely dependent on imports for 15 critical minerals and more than 50% reliant on imports for an additional 29 minerals. Worse, much of the dependency is with our leading international opponent and threat, China. China, never our friend, is now blocking sales of some of these minerals. This is consistent with my concern about the U.S. dependence on pharmaceuticals. This also justifies Trump imposing a tariff of 54% on Chinese imports of these minerals in order to encourage alternative sources and hopefully domestic development. Some of those alternative sources are Ukraine and Greenland.
Silence in the court.
Commies oppose the Department of Education closing. As a professional educator, some of my audience might be surprised that I support closing the Department of Education. Major protests are by the teachers' unions, not the overtaxed and underserved taxpayers. Note that. First, education is a responsibility of parents and local schools. Failed President Jimmy Carter created the department as a throwaway to the unions. Second, many reports have documented that American student levels are now near the bottom of all developed countries. Some whole school districts have no students meeting education standards. So if that was the purpose of the DOE, it has failed on a massive scale. Time to tell the schools to dump woke and DEI and get back to the 3 R's. Third, the few DOE operations of merit can be assigned to other departments like Treasury and the Small Business Administration. I'm okay with targeted support for poorer school districts, but consider that there are still states administration between Uncle Sam and these local districts. Pell Grants and similar elite programs like that might even go to the State Department. Think about that. I have a great college students. I asked my class of 35 seniors last week how many had read the great American classic Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Not a single student out of 35. Classics like this were required reading when I was in high school. Time to get back to basics like reading and writing real material.
Please raise your right hand.
Kechi Okuchi is an amazing person who's had an amazing life in such a short period of time. One of only 2 survivors out of 109 passengers in a plane crash in her native Nigeria when she was a child. She has survived numerous surgeries and blossomed into the fascinating person that she is today. In my position at the Cameron School of Business at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, I've had the good fortune to know her as an outstanding student. Of course, she also disappeared from our student ranks during her studies since she was a finalist on the first season of America's Got Talent. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Among so much more to say about her, she is the author of a new book, More Than My Scars. We welcome Kechi for her first appearance on Saving America.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on Saving America. Dr. Schein, it's always good to see you. I'll be seeing more of you apparently this fall semester, but
Right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's just a delight to see you again because I haven't seen you in a while, and to get a chance to have you interviewed on Saving America. So right up front, at what point did you realize you could sing, and how did you get to the point of being on television?
So honestly, I've always loved singing growing up as a child, but my voice was nothing like it is now before the accident. My voice actually changed significantly after the accidents. We don't really know why. Medically, it's hard to say, but it was just one of those things where my mom and I and my family, everyone was just like, we'll just take this as one good thing that came out of this horrible tragedy, and just kind of ran with it. And it was just this hobby, it's always been a loved hobby. After the accident, it became even more of one. And music started to become this escape for me and healed parts of me that like surgery and physical, training and stuff could not heal. So it wasn't really ever going to be anything more than a hobby until I joined my church worship team. And then a year after that, America's Got Talent kind of came into my life through one of my best friends who signed me up for the show without telling me. And that's basically how I ended up on the show. And now I'm using my voice for many more things other than, just singing to myself and my family. So yeah, that's pretty much the history of my singing.
And I know it's an audition system. Were you auditioned here in Houston or someplace else?
So they do have that. The first level of auditions is usually, the first stage is usually like in-person open house auditions, but I didn't make it to any of those. Again, I was not interested in being on a show like that because I didn't feel like my voice was anything. I felt like I had a good voice. It was nice, but I didn't think it was anything that I would compete with. Like I felt like there were too many people out there who had voices just as good. So I didn't feel like I stood a chance. So I would never have gone to a physical audition myself. And so the time for that passed. And so my best friend, she signed me up through the online audition where you fill out a form and attach a video and like talk about yourself a little bit. She did everything and kind of sent it to them in that way. So it wasn't a physical audition. It was like an online kind of thing, application thing.
So sometimes it helps to have a friend pushing you from behind a little bit.
Yeah, without her push, I definitely would not be here today. That's for sure. So
really
yeah,
fascinating. And so, okay, we're just friends here. Tell us about Simon Cowell.
Simon, I mean, obviously we know he has a reputation. He's this very frank, just a blunt man who just speaks his mind and says what he feels, whether it hurts your feelings or not. He'll tell you, the truth, about your talent, what he thinks about your talent anyway. And so, I went in there expecting to meet that Simon, because I try to prepare myself for that Simon, but I never got that Simon personally. I got a very nice, encouraging, sweet Simon that was extremely supportive of me. And I felt like when he saw me, he just took a liking to me and wanted to kind of root for me. And I think that was just like the vibe that I got from him. I'm not saying he wasn't his usual self on the show to other people, but luckily that energy was never directed at me. And I have to say that was extremely relieving because having someone like him in your corner is extremely validating and definitely helps you kind of feel a little more confident in what you have to bring to the table. So yeah, that's my story on Simon. I got the nice Simon for sure, but like I saw that not everyone got that Simon. So I was just happy, I wasn't the one who got the, the other version of him. So but yeah, that version of him is still out there, very alive and well and kicking. So
super. Well, to answer question number 3, and we usually ask 3, we're going to ask you 4 today.
Okay.
I am a big fan of working to control and reduce bullying in the workplace and in school. And I read that you are also an advocate for prevention of bullying. Tell us a little bit about your efforts in that area.
So bullying prevention is something that resonates very deeply with me, not because of what I experienced with bullying, but because of what my little sister experienced when we first moved to America. She had a very hard time adjusting and adapting, and the people around her did not make it easy for her. And I had to witness that, and put out a lot of fires along with my parents and just try to help her not to internalize any of the stuff that she was hearing about herself or how she was being treated. And thank God, what we try to teach her stuck rather than what the bullies did to her, because she blossomed into a very confident and self-assured young lady and has been that way ever since. But that experience that I had observing and protecting her during that time when things were really rough for her made me realize that I would want to be a part of something that would help prevent other kids from going through something like that as much as possible anyway. And then there's also the layer of there's a layer added to my situation where I didn't experience bullying as a burn survivor, particularly, like specifically, but I was aware that a lot of burn survivors do go through bullying simply because of how different that they look. And so those two things kind of came together and made me have this drive to use whatever platform I end up ever having to, at least in some way, use it in some way to promote bullying prevention. So how do I do this? I work with a bunch of different organizations. One of the most prominent ones would be one called Be Strong. They are a student-led bullying prevention organization. And I think that's what stuck to me the most, which is why I work with them the most. I love the fact that they're not student run, but student led. So they have a lot of events and they have a lot of platforms that they allow their students, like their participants who are their members who are students, to kind of take charge of speaking out against bullying and talking about prevention of bullying. So they are using the demographic that goes through that the most, to speak out against that, speak out against bullying. And I think that's a very effective way to do it because kids are more likely to listen to each other, so that's why I work with them the most. And so what we try to do, and what I try to do, however I can, is to kind of teach three very important things. Number one is self-love. I think that everything stems from how you feel about yourself. In other words, the more you accept yourself, the more you accept your flaws, everything about you, good and bad, it makes it harder for someone else to make you feel bad about those things. So this is something I can speak about from experience. I know that being the way that I am has a lot to do with me being authentic and presenting that authentic self to the world as much as possible. And I feel like people need to learn more about how to do that as early as possible because it helps you combat bullying, because no one can make you feel bad about yourself if you've accepted yourself. So that's the first step to me. And I try to show that in my social media, in everything that I put out there on the internet. Second thing is cyberbullying, another thing I experienced on AGT. And I try to teach people, how to just deal with that, which is, at least for me, was either ignore or block. And then if it gets too bad, report, but never engage. Engaging is the last thing you want to do because it gives these people's ego the attention that they do not deserve. So that's another thing that I try to teach. And then the last one is accepting your flaws. I think that a lot of people have a lot of difficulty in doing that. And that's why bullies latch on and use that thing you feel bad about to make you feel bad. But when you accept that thing, a lot of times those things that make you unique can become your superpower. And for me, that's what my burns have done. They've given me this avenue to kind of this uniqueness that allows me to kind of I draw strength from it, and it allows me to put out this message that I put out into the world. So, I try to teach people that their unique thing, the thing that makes them different, can end up actually being their superpower in this life and can give birth to their purpose. So I think these are the ways really I try to do what I can to prevent bullying and to teach people about it. And also not to be a bystander if you see it happening, learn how to speak out, because a lot of times it makes it worse when you just keep quiet and walk away when someone is going through something. So yeah, that's in a nutshell. I think that's really what I try to do.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, I attended Catholic school, kindergarten through 8th grade, and the nuns were not very sensitive to the issue of bullying. I was bullied a lot from like 2nd grade to 5th, 6th grade. And what helped me was to really focus on my academics, is to ignore the bullying, and I became an exceptional student, and I moved into an entirely different social group, and frankly, the rest of my academic career I hung out with the smart kids, and it helped a lot. But
yeah.
Really going in that, I mean, even many years later for me, it was a very difficult time in my life. So I certainly can relate to it. And also there's some growing concern that this may be feeding some of the mass violence that we're experiencing in America.
That's very true.
That many of the people who are the perpetrators have been bullied. And, and so, if we can all be nicer and focus on, if you see something, do something about it. Don't just watch people.
Don't be a bystander. Yeah.
So very, very cool. Hetchy, I added a 4th question for you because there's so much to do. Tell the audience a little bit about your new book, More Than My Scars.
So More Than My Scars is a book that I wrote last year. And essentially, this book is pretty much my life story so far, but in much more detail than I've ever discussed in like out loud. And it focuses mainly on the parts of my life after the accident where I learned the most important lessons that helped me kind of become the person I am today. And most of those lessons were learned while I was in South Africa, which is where I was first treated before I moved to America. Those first 7 months after the accident were the most important, most significant moments in my life, not only because that was where my life was literally hanging in the balance, and we weren't sure if I would make it or not, but because during that time, I learned a lot of like important like theories, and I gained a lot of new perspectives that basically formed my foundation and helped me kind of make sense of certain things like identity and faith, and how to kind of overcome and deal with tragedy, and what place to put my injuries and my scars, what place to put them, what importance level to give them in my life with respect to the rest of society, because eventually I would have to leave the hospital and face a world that is extremely judgmental and does not treat different very nicely. So I would have to decide what, my scars would mean to me when going back out there. And so I think during those 7 months, I learned the most important lessons. And I try to that's what I try to share in the book, in the hopes that at least one person reading it would feel like maybe they gained something from it. But ultimately, I want people who've gone through trauma to feel seen. I want people who've gone through anything that has made them kind of stagnate, I guess, in their growth, to feel seen. And it doesn't have to be a physical, obvious trauma. We all have invisible scars, invisible trauma that are just as valid. And I wanted to validate all those kinds of trauma to anyone who reads, and to let them know that they are seen and their feelings are valid, and that there are ways to get over this kind of trauma. There is life to look forward to after trauma. And I wanted my life to be an example of that. So that's why I wrote the book, and shared all the nitty-gritty stuff about my story, not just the nice sounding things like, how she grew, she's confident, she's this, she's that, but like the difficult stuff that I had to overcome to become this person today, So I think we can all relate to that anyway, even if we kind of all relate to a plane crash, but that's what I wanted to share. And so far, I think the response has been extremely heartfelt and very relieving. Makes me feel like I did the right thing by writing it. So yeah, that's what my book is about.
Outstanding. How can our audience get more information about you?
So you can find me on pretty much any social media platform. I am on Instagram, I am on Facebook, Twitter, I'm on TikTok, I'm on LinkedIn. Just type in my name, Kechi, and you will find me like that. Just type in Kechi or Kechi Official. I'm also, I also have a website, kechiofficial.com, where everything I just talked about, where it's all there, like all my social media platforms. So you can literally just go to my website and find everything else. And then, yeah, that's where you can find me, and information about my book as well, and my music. Yeah, it's all there. Kechi Official.
Fantastic.
This session is adjourned.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.